This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. About 350,000 newly unemployed people signed up for financial assistance in the United States during the first week of July. The nation's jobless rate was 8.2% in both May and June. Some employers say they would add employees if they could find workers with important technology skills. Some experts say better communication and technology could reduce this skills gap. Angel Gurria is head of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. He says even some well-educated people are having trouble finding work around the world. He says it is a tragedy that there are unemployed graduates while employers cannot find people with the skills they need. OECD officials say more than 44 million people are unemployed in the 34 wealthiest nations belonging to the organization. In the United States alone, nearly 13 million people are unemployed, but the country also has more than 3.6 million unfilled jobs. Experts say some positions are unfilled because those seeking work lack high technology skills. A company called Monster Worldwide is using some new technology it says can help solve that problem. Company official Earl Renison says computer programs called semantic search are able to process huge amounts of information. That includes millions of resumes to help connect skilled people with open jobs. Earl Renison says semantic search is designed to choose the right match from the words or expressions around a keyword. He says this helps it get the right match, even if a job posting, resume, or other documents use different words to express the same idea. He says better searches will lead to better matches and fill more jobs. Rich Milgram is head of a recruitment company called Beyond.com. He says another problem is that the people who are experts at finding just the right workers were the first ones out of work during the recession. He also says it will take time for companies to rebuild their workforces, even if they have added new recruiters. The new recruiters do not understand the business that well because they are new, says Rich Milgram. They do not have a relationship with the hiring managers. Rich Milgram says companies in need of excellent workers have to do a good job of writing job advertisements that are understandable. And job seekers need to make it clear to hiring managers how they can help their companies. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Presutti. From VOA Learning English, this is the Economics Report in Special English. Levels of corruption like bribery, abuse of power, and secret dealings are still very high in many countries. Transparency International has released its yearly Corruption Perceptions Index. The Berlin-based group rates 176 countries and territories with a number from 100 to 0. Bigger numbers are better. The index measures the perceived or apparent level of corruption in a country. The group uses information from the African Development Bank, the World Bank, and the World Economic Forum. Corruption takes many forms. Transparency International calls it the abuse of entrusted power for private gain. One common form is bribery, the use of money or gifts to persuade another person to do something wrong or illegal. Corruption is not easy to measure because it is secretive. But the World Bank has estimated that about $1 trillion in bribes are paid every year worldwide. Stealing public money is another form of corruption. Huguette Labelle is chair of Transparency International. She says the problem of corruption affects millions of people and limits their ability to get essential services like water, education, health, and licenses. A group of small developed nations scored highest on the new list. Denmark, Finland, and New Zealand received a rating of 90. Among large nations, the United States rated 73, while China rated 39. The countries with the greatest perceived level of corruption on the list are Somalia, North Korea, and Afghanistan, with scores of 8. Robin Hodes directs research at Transparency International. She says Transparency International needs evidence about how corruption works and needs to know where to target the reforms needed to promote accountability and integrity. The perceptions held by experts, businesses, and organizations are important. The World Bank notes that countries showing improvements had greater foreign investment and economic growth. For VOA Learning English, I'm Carolyn Prasuti.
This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. Counterfeit designer clothing, medicines, and other products are made and sold around the world. American investigators say the counterfeit goods industry is a bigger business than the illegal drug trade. And they say anyone buying such goods could be providing support to criminal activities. Counterfeit goods may look like the real thing, but they are copies made without the approval of the business or individual with rights to the original product. Many fake goods from East Asia enter the United States through the port of Los Angeles, California. People looking for low prices on goods go to a part of downtown Los Angeles called Santee Alley. It is a place where counterfeit goods are sold. Clothing, sunglasses, watches, and toys fill the many small stores in the area. Anita Gray has been going to Santee Alley for years. She says she would never buy fake designer products. She says she has seen them there, although not recently. Investigator Chris Buckner says there is a reason people do not see counterfeit goods openly displayed at Santee Alley anymore. Police have repeatedly raided stores that carry fake designer goods. As a result, people who sell them are much more careful. Chris Buckner says sellers will offer the fake goods to buyers and take them to a storage area where the goods are hidden. An estimated $500 billion is spent on counterfeit goods every year. Chris Buckner notes that local street gangs, organized crime groups, and even terrorists are involved in counterfeiting. At the Port of Los Angeles, police seize counterfeit clothing, prescription medications, electronics, and cigarettes. Investigators say large amounts of the fake and stolen designer products come from China and enter American ports in large shipping containers. More than 14 million shipping containers arrive in Los Angeles every year. Police are able to inspect less than 1% of them. Police say there are ways to tell if a product is counterfeit. Look at the kind of store where the product is sold and whether the price seems too low. If it is probably a fake. For VOA Special English, I'm Mario Ritter. To read, listen, and learn English, go to voaspecialenglish.com. You can also find our captioned videos at the VOA Learning English channel on YouTube.
This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. Anyone who has ever borrowed money can relate to the debate over raising America's borrowing limit. People who have reached their limit can try to ask their bank to increase it and go deeper into debt. Or they can cut their spending and try to get their finances under control. Or they can do both. Either way, they have to keep paying their bills. If they default on their debt, that only makes it harder and costlier to borrow in the future. In July, President Obama and congressional leaders held hours of sometimes tense meetings at the White House. Opposition Republican leaders agreed on the need to raise the borrowing limit by August 2nd, or risk the nation's first default. The argument was over how to cut deficits. Most Republicans oppose any kind of tax increase. Most Democrats in Congress oppose big cuts in government spending, especially social programs for retirees and the poor. Jerry Webman is chief economist for Oppenheimer Funds, an investment company. He says the central issue is how the U.S. is going to bring its federal budget back down to a sustainable deficit level. He says the debate has deep roots in the Constitution. The Constitution was written by people who were very, very suspicious of executive authority and built into the Constitution lots of ways in which the three branches of government could check and balance each other. Those three branches represent the President, Congress, and the courts. Congress passed the first debt limit law in 1917. That was to control the costs of America's entry into World War I. Today, Jerry Webman says the United States is going through an important debate on what services Americans can expect from their government. He says, I think we may be looking at one of those almost generational changes in the role of the federal government in U.S. society. Lenders, worried about the risk of not getting repaid, usually demand high interest rates. That has happened to heavily indebted countries such as Greece, Ireland, and Portugal. On July 14th, Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke warned lawmakers that lack of action to raise the borrowing limit would mean a lower credit rating for the United States. The central banker So that means the government could have to pay sharply higher interest rates. And that would only add to deficits in what he called a self-inflicted wound. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Presutti. This is the VOA Special English Economics Report. A roller coaster ride is one description for the days of historic ups and downs in stock markets recently. If you want to use a more technical term, the markets have experienced volatility in a big way. Major measures of United States markets closed with their biggest one-day losses since the financial crisis of 2008. Asia and Europe also had sharp declines. Volatile markets can react suddenly in wild and unpredictable ways. Usually, some kind of shock, or more than one, is involved. For example, on August 5th, one of the three major credit rating agencies downgraded long-term United States government debt. Standard & Poor's lowered its opinion of Treasury securities one step from the highest rating, AAA, to AA+. But shocks like a hopeful jobs report or good earnings results can stop a fall and send prices higher. Also, when prices fall, investors may find good deals and start buying. The United States held S&P's top rating for 70 years and never had a downgrade. But many investors were expecting that to happen even after the budget deal in Washington. In early August, Congress agreed to increase the government's borrowing limit in return for steps to cut spending and reduce the deficit. S&P says it thinks America's debt will only increase in the future. President Obama disagreed, saying, "The fact is, we didn't need a rating agency to tell us that we need a balanced, long-term approach to deficit reduction." He said markets still consider United States credit as among the world's safest. Still, there have been growing worries of another recession, a double dip. On August 9th, policymakers at the central bank said economic growth so far this year has been considerably slower than they had expected. The Federal Reserve said it would likely keep short-term interest rates near zero for at least 2 more years. Borrowing costs for the United States remain very low, but debt worries in 2 of Europe's biggest economies have increased costs for their governments in recent weeks. On August 8th, the European Central Bank began buying debt securities from Spain and Italy. These efforts helped push down interest rates for those countries. But Europe must still deal with the rescues of Greece, Ireland, and Portugal. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Presutti. For more business news and to learn American English, go to voaspecialenglish.com.
From VOA Learning English, this is the Economics Report. Detroit Mayor Dave Bing had to report some bad news recently. He said Detroit was seeking bankruptcy protection. The move would give the city court protection from creditors. The decision to declare bankruptcy is an effort to restructure and reduce debt. It comes at a difficult time for Detroit. In March, Michigan Governor Rick Snyder named Kevin Orr, a bankruptcy expert, to oversee the city's financial problems. Detroit has been struggling to reduce a budget deficit of more than $300 million. In addition, the city's long-term debt has increased to at least $18 billion. Detroit's problems have grown over many years. Michigan State University professor Eric Scorsone says the city depended too much on one industry, automobile manufacturing. Jobs with car makers were a big reason why Detroit was one of the country's largest cities half a century ago. In the 1950s, it had a population of about 1.8 million people. Today, the number is down to less than 800,000. Robin Boyle is a professor of urban planning at Wayne State University. He says over the years, many Detroit residents moved to areas outside the city or even left the state. That hurt Detroit's ability to invest in itself. It is rare for a large American city to seek bankruptcy protection. In 1975, New York City came close before the federal government agreed to provide money. Detroit, however, is the largest city to seek bankruptcy. Now, a federal judge is to consider Detroit's request. One of the main issues is what to do about the retirement pay of city workers. Currently, there are many more retired workers than those paying into the pension system. For VOA Learning English, I'm Alex Villarreal.